Chapter 24. Part 2. Let's continue Elijah's story from the Bible. Then Elijah said to him, Elisha, stay here please, for the Lord has sent me on to Jericho. 2 Kings chapter 2 verse 4. Jericho means the time of fragrance, as in the time of a fruit's ripeness and maturity. This would be the person's production of spiritual fruits, as in the parable of the sower. This would be the maturing of one's purpose abilities. Jericho also has another root meaning which can mean to breathe or blow. This would symbolize the empowering of the Spirit, or to make quick in understanding. This would be the development of spiritual eyes and ears and spiritual gifts. In short, going to Jericho would represent the spiritual development of Elisha, his purpose training. Jericho would represent the crossing of the wilderness. In addition, Jericho was a city known for its wealth, power, and immense city walls. Think about how this translates to the character of a person if Jericho could be compared to a spiritually mature person, one equipped for spiritual warfare, and who is heavily fortified against Satan's attacks, both spiritually and mentally strong. That was where Elijah and Elisha were about to go, from the purpose revelation to the training. Let's continue the story. Then Elijah said to him, Elisha, stay here please, for the Lord has sent me on to Jericho. But he said, as the Lord lives and as you should live, I will not leave you. So they came to Jericho. 2 Kings chapter 2 verse 4. Again, there was the pressure to stay put, as at the purpose revelation. But even when pressured to stay, if a person wishes to make it from the revelation to the purpose, they need to move forward to the spiritual wilderness represented here by Jericho. Let's continue. Now the sons of the prophets who were at Jericho came to Elisha and said to him, Do you know that the Lord will take away your master from over you today? So he answered, Yes, I know, keep silent. 2 Kings chapter 2 verse 5. In Jericho, surprise, surprise, there were other people, also God's people, who tried to discourage Elisha. In essence, they were saying, Why are you still following Elijah? Don't you know he'll be gone today? All this will be for no reason. Or they could be saying, Elijah is leaving today and you're not ready to take his place. There isn't enough time for you to get ready. At every level, there will be such resistance, such doubt. Will you move forward anyway? Let's continue. Then Elijah said to him, Stay here, please, for the Lord has sent me on to the Jordan. But he said, As the Lord lives and as your soul lives, I will not leave you. So the two of them went on. 2 Kings chapter 2 verse 6. After Jericho, there is just one last obstacle before the promised purpose, the Jordan River. In the original Hebrew, the Jordan means the low place. This would symbolize humility, the complete submission of the disciple. Also notice that even though Elisha was finished at Jericho, his wilderness preparation that is, there was still pressure to quit at the moment of graduation. If he had, he would have, metaphorically speaking, died in the wilderness and never inherited the promise. Remember, the children of Israel had been readied as well, but as soon as the time came for them to cross over the Jordan, just as seen here with Elisha, and begin to conquer the promised land, they did not submit to God's commandment to trust in him fully. They submitted to their irrational fear of the purpose. Because they refused to move forward, they were barred from the promise and died in the wilderness. Before inheriting the purpose, therefore, the final step requires us to fully submit to God. Let's continue Elijah's story. So the two of them went on, and 50 men of the sons of the prophets went and stood facing them at a distance, while the two of them stood by the Jordan. Now Elijah took his mantle, rolled it up and struck the water, and it was divided this way and that, so that the two of them crossed over on dry ground. 2 Kings chapter 2 verses 6 to 8. When the Israelites crossed over the Jordan, they crossed into the promised land. Therefore, when Elijah crossed over, he was crossing over from the wilderness to his real promised land, heaven. But not quite yet for his student Elisha, because he will not be officially crossing over the Jordan into his promise until after Elijah is gone, a few verses later. The first crossing had to do with his master Elijah and his transition to heaven. The second is with Elisha and his purpose. I will explain gradually over the next few verses. I will also point out it was the mantle, or the spiritual authority of the calling, that parted the way for them through the waters. To step into the purpose, you need the spiritual authority. Your own desires, ambitions, plans, and power will not open the way for you. Only God can part those waters, and He will part them only when you are properly prepared. Even the Israelites, when they crossed over the Jordan River, God parted it for them as well. But in this case, it was Elijah's mantle, and Elijah himself who used the mantle, which parted the way for them. This event has nothing to do with Elisha. In that particular moment, it was actually Elijah who was humbling himself for the next phase of his journey. Elisha was merely tagging along as a witness. Let's continue the story. And so it was, when they had crossed over, that Elijah said to Elisha, "Ask, what may I do for you before I am taken away from you?" Elisha said, "Please let a double portion of your spirit be upon me." So he said, "You have asked a hard thing. Nevertheless, if you see me when I am taken from you, it shall be so for you, but if not, it shall not be so." 2 Kings 2, 9-10. I don't know if this happens to every Christian. Frankly, I don't know why it would not. But God has asked me this very same thing not long ago. What is it that you want, Lex? Ask, and I'll give it to you. But I won't tell you what I requested. It was personal. If you recall, the same thing happened with Solomon. When Solomon first stepped into God's promise for him to be king, God appeared to him in a dream and asked what it was that Solomon desired, and God would grant it for him. Solomon requested wisdom. I think that the Lord does this for every one of his children who are about to cross over the Jordan into their purpose. A wilderness graduation gift of sorts. Here's more of the Bible story. Then it happened, as they continued on and talked, that suddenly a chariot of fire appeared with horses of fire, and separated the two of them, and Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. 2 Kings 2:11. Take notice that Elisha would not leave Elijah no matter what. In the end, it was God who had to separate them. Likewise with you, if you are being trained up and discipled, it will be God who decides when to stop your training, not you, not the person training you. So keep pressing ahead until certain doors open and others close. Don't quit just because your expectations are not lining up with God's perfect timing.